On August the 17th, 1942, General Friedrich Paulus's Sixth Army crossed the Don and began a final push on Stalingrad. Six days later, one panzer thrust had reached the Volga River just north of the city, and German forces were fighting in the outer suburbs. Hitler seemed poised for a famous victory. Stalingrad was an important industrial center. It straggled for more than 12 miles along the west bank of the river. Its factories produced over a quarter of the Soviet Union's tractors and trucks, as well as tanks and guns. The Russian people had turned it into a formidable fortress. They had been helped by Hitler's decision to send Army Group B's panzers to the south. This had given them another 2 weeks to prepare. The German plan was to make a direct assault on the city. Now began one of the most prolonged and intense battles of World War II. Slowly, the Germans edged forward, street by street, with Stuka dive bombers blitzing just ahead of them. The fighting was savage, house to house, room by room. The Soviet defenders used the sewers for shelter and communications, and the ruins above for sniping. Russian reinforcements had to be brought across the river. Often they were under assault from the air. But even so, thousands got through. By late September, the Germans had pushed their way through most of the city, almost to the Volga. For Hitler, the capture of Stalingrad was now an obsession. On October the 4th, 1942, General Paulus launched what was meant to be the final assault on Stalingrad. Tanks led the way, grinding over the rubble and firing point blank into courtyards. One German officer said, "The advance is measured in corpses, not meters." German victory seemed certain, but in fact, the Germans were dangerously overextended. By mid-November, the Soviet army was bringing in reinforcements. More than 1 million troops, 13,500 guns, 900 tanks, and over 1,000 aircraft were secretly moved to the battle zone. On November the 19th, they attacked the Germans' northern flank. After a massive artillery barrage, the T-34s and assault infantry burst through the German positions. Now it was the Germans who surrendered in their thousands. The next day, a Soviet assault in the south was equally successful. And on November the 23rd, these pincer movements met west of Stalingrad, cutting off the German 6th Army. General Paulus, in charge of the German forces, could have broken out, but Hitler ordered him to stand and fight. The Führer had been assured by the Luftwaffe that sufficient supplies could be airlifted into Stalingrad. This was enough for him to announce that the German positions must hold out until relieved. To help Paulus, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, the overall German commander in the region, launched Operation Winter Storm on December the 12th. It was an attempt by the German panzers to break the Soviet encirclement of the city. For 2 days it went well, but then Red Army resistance increased. By December the 23rd, the German rescue attempt had ground to a halt about 30 miles from the city. Manstein advised the beleaguered Paulus to attempt to break out of Stalingrad. But Paulus wanted Hitler's permission. This was refused. It was probably too late anyway. Marshal Zhukov now unleashed the next stage of his master plan. It was a massive assault on the Panzer Relief Operation. The panzers were pushed back, away from the city, and by the end of December, all hope of relieving the German forces in Stalingrad had gone. Worse still, plans to airlift aid into the city were a fiasco. The German troops needed 700 tons of supplies a day to survive. They never received more than 80. The weather was too bad, and the Red Air Force now commanded the skies. Steadily, the Soviet troops squeezed in on the encircled Germans. 200,000 men were trapped. On January the 8th, the Soviets called on the Germans to surrender. They refused. On January the 31st, 1943, Paulus was forced to surrender. Over 100,000 men stumbled off into captivity. Only 5,000 would ever return to Germany. Stalingrad had been a bloody battle. The Germans had been savaged. They had lost some 300,000 of their men and at least as many of their allies. The Russians had lost about the same number, including thousands of civilians. It was Germany's greatest catastrophe in the war so far, but it wouldn't be the last. The Red Army was now inflicting massive defeats on Hitler's forces across the whole Eastern Front.